Ciao ragazzi, benvenuti a Palazzo Parigi a Milano. Oggi siamo qui con Longines per parlare con il loro presidente, con il loro product manager e scoprire alcune novità dell'anno. Hi everyone, welcome back on IWS. My name is Fabrizio and today I'm here with Matthias Breschan, President and CEO of Longines. Welcome, Matthias.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Fabrizio.
Thank you too. And today we're going to talk about watches, obviously, but we're going to dive deep into Longines brand and where he's headed to, and also a few stuff about your career in the watchmaking industry and in Swatch Group as well. So who is Matthias Breschan and how did he fall in love with watches?
Well, actually, I joined the Swatch Group in 1996, and by this time, everybody had the possibility to participate to a training class to learn the basics about watches. So the difference about mechanical watches, quartz watches, etc., etc. And that class lasted for 2 days, and at the end of the class, every participant got a pocket watch and was then asked to disassemble the pocket watch and reassemble it. And I think from this day, first of all, my perception for watchmaking, my perception and appreciation for micromechanics, and also for mechanical movements totally changed. And I think it's really the date that I have today in my mind that changed my passion totally for watches.
Yeah, sure, I can understand. I mean, working with a pocket watch and disassemble it, it's not something that anyone can do, I would say. You must have patience, you must have the eye, you must have the hand that you must be very precise, I would say.
Exactly, yes, but also you find out that when you do this exercise, that you start to have an emotional link to the product, that there's really, because the components are moving, so there's a life in the mechanical watch, and you immediately get an emotional link to it, and this is, I think, why also mechanical watches became so strong over the past years.
I absolutely agree, and I think that young people are now getting a stronger bond with watches, with mechanical watches, also because it's an art. It's something that it's living in its own. So I totally agree. And from your experience, you didn't start in the watch industry. I mean, you had some experience in the past and did you learn anything that you still apply today in your work? Did you learn something that it really stuck in your mind?
Well, I think there are 3 points, whatever industry, whatever type of job you have, that I think is always important to keep in mind. I would say the first is that you should never be self-satisfied with what you have achieved. You always need to try to push forward, look for innovations and evolve. You never should stay where you are and be happy, because if you stop innovating, if you stop to be creative or question yourself, you probably start to killing the brand you're working for. A second point is, I think you should never forget that any success that you have for a brand or with a brand, it's never related to one single person. It's always a team, and that is true in any industry. And maybe the third point is that, for example, I was working also within the Swatch Group with different brands. I started with Swatch, I was then with Hamilton, Radar, and now with Longines. You should never forget that when you join a brand, and like, for example, myself 2 years ago in Longines, it's not the brand that has to adapt to myself, but it's me that has to adapt to the brand, because Longines is probably one of the most successful brands in the last 20 years. So it's my responsibility to find out what made Longines so strong in these past 20 years, in order to evolve this point in the coming 20 years to remain as strong.
Yeah, I agree, because one important thing that is to keep the legacy of the past, like to keep the history going of the brand, not to completely renovate and forget about what the brand was in the past, because it wouldn't make sense.
Absolutely, and that was for me also, I would say, the biggest surprise when I actually joined Longines, because the situation was complicated. It was in the 1st July 2020, so most of our stores worldwide, they were closed, so it was really terrible.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in August 20 already, it started to get much better, and for the first time in August, we were already able to achieve a turnover that was above 2019. And then also the other months in the remaining year of 2020 were quite strong. We were not able to really catch up everything we lost in the first half, but it was really not as bad as we could have thought by the mid of the year. 21 continued in this direction, and also 22 started extremely strongly. Now, I totally agree with you. For me, the big surprise, despite that I was already more than 20 years in the watch industry, was to find out that there are so many things in the history and heritage of Longines that many people are still not aware of. When you ask today people who invented the high frequency movement, the GMT movement, the flyback movement, etc., not necessarily they always will have Longines on top of their mind. So I think this is definitely something that we will continue to strengthen in the future, because it really belongs to the heritage, it belongs to the brand. And like you said correctly before, yes, there's a huge interest now for vintage watches, also among a younger clientele, and in particular an appreciation if this heritage is authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And while talking with your team, we've talked about how Longines is gonna go back with a strong European character. Like, why are you taking this decision?
Well, I think in the past 20 years, the strong growth for the Swiss watch industry came in particular from the Asian countries. And Longines became extremely strong also in the Asian markets. And also when tourists from Asia were traveling to Europe or the US, they massively bought Swiss watches. That was great for us. But we found out now with the pandemic, once the tourists are not coming anymore, how important it is to continue to concentrate on the domestic customers. And it was also maybe for us a little wake-up call that in the past years, we forgot a little bit about this local domestic customers, because we were just spoiled by very big sales to tourists. But the domestic customer remains our main priority. And here I think we have totally switched, like you said, the focus in the past 2 years, that again in the middle is the domestic local customers in terms of products and in terms of marketing. And I would say in general, the whole marketing mix, that we need to much better address these local and domestic customers. And of course, you see this also in the collection and the marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I always felt when I started working in this field, that there was a huge focus for like other markets other than like Italy, Europe. I think that we Italians have a particular taste. Like we like elegant timepieces. We like small sizes, and I think it was brands were missing this part. Like it was very important. Now that Longines is taking back this character, I think it's really great.
Well, I think Italy always has been a very important market for Longines, and it always was in our top 5. And I think in particular what made Longines so strong is this balance of having, for being equally strong for elegant watches and sport watches, having an offer equally interesting for men and women, having a collection that is equally interested and very much balanced. This is something that really is unique to Longines, of course backed up by all this big heritage, and this is, I think, also why this appreciation from the Italian customers to Longines has always been strong. But you're totally right, we need now to take advantage of this more, we need to focus on this more, and I think in particular now with the 22 collection you see this change, and well, the first result or reactions that we got from our customers when we were presenting the novelties of this year to them was really excellent.
Yeah, I saw some models in the screen before the interview, and I saw some watches that are gonna be produced in the next months and are really interesting, I would say. And I have a question about, because I was reading your biography on Longines website, and I saw that you said that watchmaking is very lucky because it can look at the past and design watches for the future. It can look at its heritage, it can take inspiration from the past. And I love vintage watches, so I really love heritage collection. But don't you think it could be also a flaw in watchmaking, always looking at the past?
Absolutely, you're right. We have also in our collection, we have really replica heritage pieces, but if I take, for example, the Spirit family as an example, it recalls our rich heritage and relationship with the world of aviation. When we started to bring out the Spirit 2 years ago, everybody said, it's another brand with pilot watches. But when you look at the history of Longines with aviation is probably the strongest of the whole Swiss watch industry. It started already in the 20s because all pioneers that explored either the sky, the sea, or even the land, they needed very precise timepieces, and they relate on Longines because they had a clear advantage in this field versus a lot of other brands. And aviators were, of course, relying on extremely precise watches because they needed this as well as in the navigation instruments. Longines was also supplying for most of these airplanes the navigation instruments, but also timepieces that allowed them to make this calculation because it was the time of trying to break the records. And you know all these very famous people like Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart, Howard Hughes, Amy Johnson. They all work together a lot with Longines, and of course in the 20s, when the air traffic started to increase a lot, there was a big need also on the boat navigation side to find a reference time that everybody can use to avoid, for example, crashes either on the sea with the boats or with airplanes. So Longines by this time developed the first wrist GMT watch, and that was something that by this time was totally new. We already had in 1908 the first pocket GMT watch that was developed especially for a demand that we had by this time from Istanbul. So it's a very different story, but the history of Longines with aviation started already in 1925. At the same time, we brought out the first flyback chronograph. So Longines had a very rich heritage and relationship with all these aviators. And when we bring out now, for example, the Spirit collection, of course, it's inspired by the rich heritage, but we use state-of-the-art technology. Like all these watches are equipped with the silicon balance spring to have them totally anti-magnetic. They use, of course, the latest quality also of our new movement. And for the GMT Zulu that we are launching actually this month, we are using in-house exclusive Longines movement of highest quality.
Yeah, I saw it on your wrist when you got into the room, and I was like, oh, nice. So how do you feel about the new Zulu? How does it feel on the wrist?
Well, I think what I like very much on the Zulu is this is a watch that really has, I think, like I said, it recalls this rich history. Longines invented the first GMT wristwatch, but it also uses state-of-the-art technology in many senses. So it starts with the finishing, that is a satinated finishing that you have on the case, a very high quality also on the bracelet and on the buckle. Of course, a ceramic bezel and an exclusive GMT movement. And it's the GMT movement that is what we call the high-end GMT movement. For example, I was in the United States last week, and what the nice thing is with this movement is when you travel to the US, the only thing you change is the hour hand. The GMT hand anyway stays on my home time, and when you go to the US, you only change the hour hand. You don't need to change and adjust the minute hand, so it always stays accurate. And that is a huge advantage, where a low-cost GMT movement, you would need to adjust both of them. So this is, I think, what also other brands in the very high-end use, but we remain here also at a price level that is extremely affordable. That also was something that also was a strong point of Longines. So I'm really super proud that we are again able to offer a watch with an extremely high quality at a very affordable price, but also linked and backed up by a very authentic, rich history.
Yeah, I agree. And the price point, I think it's interesting. I mean, for the quality and the movement and all the finishing, you can see how I mean, I can when I look at it, you can see it's a nice watch. Yeah, I really like the new Zulu. And another thing that I believe it's interesting for the Zulu and the GMT especially, it's the fact that we are now used to having phones. And I always thought that, okay, you don't need a watch for checking the time, but you just need it because you like it, just for the design, just for aesthetics. But now, with some experiences, I felt that the functions like GMT or maybe calendars are actually useful.
I mean, I agree with you. A lot of people, they do not buy today watches only to read the time. The watch became really an accessory, a perfect accessory to say something also about your personality, because when you wear a pilot watch, it doesn't mean that you taking off with your helicopter in the afternoon. But when you look, for example, at me, you know, we are in a business environment, so we always have a suit with a light shirt, and actually very limited possibilities to express ourselves or make a statement about ourselves. So the watch remains the perfect accessory to do it. But you are right, typically the GMT, when traveling, and we are all traveling a lot under normal circumstances, let's say it like this. And I saw this, for example, also last week in the US. Yes, to have a direct look on this GMT function to find out the exact time in Europe is a very nice feature that you have on this watch. But a watch truly became a perfect accessory. It's a very emotional product. So yes, it's not only to read the time the reason for buying watches today.
When closing interviews, we usually ask our host a piece of advice for young people like us that are following us and are listening to us in our interviews. So what's one thing that you would suggest to young guys and girls that want to go into the watch industry, maybe for in different aspects like design or maybe some management type of job? What would you suggest?
But first of all, concerning watches, I think it's very important, let's say when you want to join the watch industry and work in the watch industry, or for any other brand also in other industries, for me the most important for a brand is when the statement is authentic. When we develop a new watch, we do not have to artificially create a story around it and desperately find something to justify what we have developed. No, for Longines we have the luxury that everything is written in our heritage, and actually we even have the luxury that we can pick the nicest pieces from this rich heritage that we have to bring back new models, like for example this Zulu GMT and other models that we have already in the development for the coming years, to recall these milestones from the history, but in a very contemporary and attractive timepiece that perfectly fits the consumer's demands of today.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for staying with us. Thank you, Matthias, for this interview, and hope to see you again for the next launches.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Fabrizio, and all the best to you as well.
Thank you. Bene ragazzi, abbiamo avuto questa bellissima conversazione con il presidente di Longines, Mattia Breschan. Adesso ci spostiamo al piano di sotto per parlare con il product manager e per scoprire gli orologi nel dettaglio. Bene ragazzi, siamo qui in compagnia di Giuseppe Miccio, Head of Product di Longines. Abbiamo parlato prima un po' più della parte storica e adesso invece ci focalizziamo proprio sugli orologi. Quindi benvenuto Giuseppe.
Grazie.
La prima domanda che facciamo di solito un po' per rompere il ghiaccio e per far capire a chi ci ascolta e chi ci guarda, chi è Giuseppe Miccio? Raccontaci un pochino come ti sei appassionato agli orologi.
Allora, sono il responsabile dello sviluppo del prodotto Longines e come ben sai sono italiano, ma sono nato in Svizzera, più precisamente a Neuchâtel, vicinissimo a una ventina di chilometri di Saint-Imier, e direi dal mondo dell'orologio svizzero in generale. Quindi io ho cominciato con il design, un background di product designer, e ovviamente mi sono appassionato essendo nella regione degli orologi. Devo ammettere che la prima passione erano le auto. Mio papà è un meccanico, aveva un'officina, quindi ho cominciato nelle auto, il design, veramente il feeling col design ha cominciato con le auto e poi con gli orologi, appunto.
Certo, poi il mondo delle auto comunque è sempre un pochino collegato a quello degli orologi, quindi immagino, e poi Neuchâtel è la patria, una delle città più importanti per l'orologeria. E parlando appunto di design, parlando con il vostro team italiano abbiamo scoperto e capito che vi state spostando più su uno stile europeo, quindi state tornando a lavorare sui mercati dei paesi specifici. Come si differenziano, per dire, ogni mercato ha il proprio gusto? Il mercato asiatico ha un tipo di stile, il mercato americano ha un altro stile e il mercato europeo un altro ancora. Cosa c'è di nuovo?
Devo dire che i gusti fra i mercati si stanno un po' azzerando. Abbiamo notato qualche anno fa c'era veramente il tipico prodotto per i cinesi, per il mercato americano, per il mercato europeo, ma i gusti si traduce nelle vendite, si sta veramente azzerrando. Tutti i mercati hanno più o meno gli stessi gusti. Ovviamente ci sono specificità in termini di dimensioni, ma più o meno adesso tutti i mercati hanno gli stessi gusti, proprio in termini di prodotto e di design.
Parlando quindi del nuovo arrivato, quindi lo Zulu. Mm-hmm. Qual è stata l'ispirazione? Dove avete preso le idee per questi nuovi orologi?
Allora, lo Zulu è stato ideato all'inizio dello sviluppo della collezione Spirit. Quando abbiamo sviluppato Spirit c'era in mente dall'inizio di sviluppare un calibro, un movimento GMT. Perché? Perché tutta la collezione è ispirata all'aviazione e ai pionieri dell'epoca e quindi un GMT ci sta tutto. E abbiamo scoperto nel nostro museo pezzi interessantissimi e appunto Longines ha cominciato in 1908 con orologi da tasca plurifusi orari. Quindi veramente un heritage, una legittimità incredibile in termini di movimento GMT e sulla nuova collezione Spirit era ovvio. Quindi c'è un'ispirazione a livello del heritage del brand, ma in un'estetica molto contemporanea.
Certamente, anche vedendo la misura comunque non è troppo grande, perché comunque 42 mm, ci sono delle misure per dire sui 45 mm che siamo su prodotti legati a polsi più importanti, invece i 42 mm comunque si sposano abbastanza in termini di pubblico più ampio. E a livello di tecnologie, quindi abbiamo parlato di un nuovo calibro, quindi di un nuovo calibro cronometro e di un paio di altre tecnologie. Noi ne abbiamo vista una prima che è quella del cinturino, quindi che accorgimenti avete introdotto in questo caso?
Allora, precisamente sullo Zulu abbiamo lavorato l'ergonomia del prodotto, appunto è un 42 mm, ma molto ergonomico. Abbiamo accorciato le anse della cassa affinché un piccolo polso possa veramente vestire il 42 tranquillamente. A livello del bracciale pure abbiamo lavorato l'ergonomia con le prime maglie del bracciale che sono più spesse per avere una bella continuità con la cassa.
La cassa, esatto.
Quindi lavoro di dettaglio ma che dà la qualità percepita al prodotto. Poi per quel che riguarda il calibro siamo su un vero movimento GMT, un vero movimento da pilota per le persone che viaggiano, quindi una funzione tecnicamente molto elevata. Quindi è veramente un prodotto completo a livello di tecnica e di design.
Assolutamente, concordo. E noi adesso questa nuova collezione si ispira molto al passato, alla storia di Longines, però con un carattere moderno. Avete poi una collezione che è quella Heritage, che si sposa con un design più vintage, sia a livello di misure che a livello di quadranti, tutte queste caratteristiche che ricordano i modelli del passato. Secondo te, qual è la differenza a livello qualitativo tra un modello heritage e un modello vintage vero e proprio? Cosa c'è di diverso?
Tantissime cose. A livello tecnico, già a livello del movimento, adesso tutti i nostri movimenti automatici sono con il spirale in silicio, quindi a livello di movimenti tanta evoluzione tecnica. Poi a livello di costruzione, di affidabilità, in termini di resistenza all'acqua, resistenza agli impatti, tutto questo non è comparabile al pezzo vintage. Però il pezzo vintage ha il suo fascino proprio perché non aveva tutte queste problematiche, quindi casse piccoline, aperture grandissime che ad oggi con i nostri standard di qualità non possiamo più o quasi più produrre.
Certo, anche perché poi diventano un pochino fragili, magari i pezzi vintage rispetto a quelli moderni, poi uno stile di vita diverso. Adesso, sai, magari andare a sbattere contro il muro con un orologio vintage equivale a distruggerlo, mentre invece con un orologio moderno si rovina, ma non è la stessa cosa.
Giustissimo.
Parlando poi sempre un po' di vintage, questa non è una domanda che avevo segnato, però mi interessava tanto capire un pochino il rapporto con Goldberger e con Auro Montanari. Come è nata? Perché lui è un grandissimo appassionato di Longines, credo che abbia una tra le collezioni più interessanti come collezione privata. E come è nata con lui?
Allora, come prima cosa devo dirti che in ufficio uno dei libri che ho sempre in ufficio accanto a me è il libro di Goldberger. È una Bibbia, direi,
Esatto.
per noi, perché sì, la sua collezione è assolutamente fantastica. I pezzi che ci sono nel suo libro sono pezzi veramente particolari, però ovviamente noi abbiamo il museo che è una risorsa infinita. Quindi la relazione con lui è buonissima, abbiamo lavorato su un Legend Diver con lui, quindi mi ispiro, il team Longines si ispira tanto a certi certi pezzi che il signor Goldberger ha nella sua collezione.
Certo, è un po' anche, aiuta a volte anche a ispirarsi e parlare con alcuni collezionisti per capire il mondo da una visione, da una prospettiva un po' diversa, certamente. Quindi il calibro 13ZN nel mercato del vintage è diventato davvero importantissimo. I collezionisti si battono in sala nelle case d'asta per acquisirne uno. Avete mai pensato di riprodurlo un pochino come Omega ha fatto con il 321?
Allora, pensarci, certamente ci abbiamo pensato, però il calibro 13ZN è assolutamente stupendo, però a livello di non di qualità ma di affidabilità era molto complicato. Il reglaggio del calibro si faceva veramente a mano, era molto difficile a livello industriale. È per quello che dopo Longines ha fatto il 30CH, che era molto più industriale, ispirato al 13ZN ma più industriale. Quindi noi, come per lo Zulu e come per altri progetti che verranno l'anno prossimo, abbiamo un approccio un po' differente. Non vogliamo fare riproduzioni identiche, ma vogliamo ispirarci al 13ZN o altri calibri, ma modernizzarli per avere un approccio industriale, qualitativo e appunto affidabile, come il discorso del comparativo fra il vintage e la linea heritage.
Certo, anche perché poi ovviamente avendo gli strumenti di adesso sarebbe quasi un controsenso non andare incontro a usare tutte queste tecnologie, la spirale in silicio e tutte altre caratteristiche. Collegandomi proprio al futuro di Longines, quindi abbiamo parlato un pochino dei mercati, abbiamo parlato del gusto europeo e dei gusti di altri continenti che si stanno piano piano uniformando. Che piani avete per Longines a livello di prodotti? Cosa vedremo nel futuro?
Allora, vedremo tantissime cose, nel senso che continueremo a innovare proponendo nuovi prodotti, nuove innovazioni tecniche che ci permettano di raccontare il passato di Longines. C'è l'esempio del GMT quest'anno, dell'Ultrachrome, ma abbiamo tantissime altre cose a livello di funzione dell'orologio, a livello di movimenti, quindi l'idea è veramente di poter proporre prodotti qualitativi, contemporanei, ma che si ispirano al passato. E quando si guarda al passato di Longines è infinito a livello di prodotto, ma prodotto sportivo, prodotto classico, prodotto per donna e per uomo. Quindi direi il campo di esplorazione è veramente infinito, quindi vedrete tante innovazioni che ci permettano di raccontare la storia di Longines.
Beh, sono molto curioso di scoprirle e vedremo appunto nei prossimi mesi e prossimi anni. Bene ragazzi, io ringrazio Giuseppe per questa bellissima chiacchierata.
Grazie a te, è stato un piacere.
È stato un piacere anche per noi, speriamo che questa giornata con Longines vi sia piaciuta e ci vediamo al prossimo video.